on in the back here in just a second, pretty sure. Go the ones that are to the back and middle. Very good. Now there's light. So glad that you guys are here with us today. We are wrapping up a series today called 30-Minute Theology. 30-Minute Theology. And in this series, really all we're doing is studying God, learning about Him. And what's so cool is that people throughout history, they have experienced a relationship with God, and it has been transformative in their lives. And what they did was they went and they wrote down what they experienced. They wrote down what they heard. Sometimes God even spoke directly to them, and they wrote down what they heard. And then what they did was they passed these documents down from generation to generation until eventually we put them all together, and it came into this thing that we call the Bible. And so we're able to, when we read the Bible, not just read a book, but read what people have accounted about God for literally thousands of years. And so we are studying what it means to know God and who He is. This is extremely important. Matter of fact, there's a kind of famous theologian, pastor, who said this about this. He said, "What comes into our minds when we think of God is the most important thing about us. The determining fact about any man is not what he at any given time may say or do, but what he in his deep heart conceives God to be like." I knew I should have practiced that quote one more time. So listen, what you believe about God makes all the difference in the world. It does. And listen, if you look at God and you see Him as this kind of judgmental bully, guess what? That's going to have a direct impact on what your relationship with Him is like. If you look at God and you think that He is unforgiving, if you look at God and think that He is untrustworthy, then guess what? You're probably going to be anxious in your life. If you look at God and you think that He is just this distant being somewhere out there that you can't see or touch or feel, then guess what? You're probably going to treat Him like that. So it's actually extremely important that we know what God is like, who He is. And so far we've learned about the idea that God is love. We followed that up with that God is a God of wrath. Big contrast there. And we said that God is holy. Now today I'm going to cheat a little bit. You guys okay if I cheat a little bit?
I am.
Some of you are real quick to say that. So here's the thing. I said we were going to cover one part of God, one attribute, one characteristic of God every single Sunday in this series. But this is the finale. So I have to tell you two things about God. And the reason that I have to tell you two things is because we're going to study an encounter today that somebody had. One of the most famous leaders of the Old Testament, really one of the most famous leaders of the Bible and world, had this encounter with God. It was probably his most famous and popular encounter. Matter of fact, even if you're not a church person, you have probably heard a lot about this encounter, maybe even made fun of it a time or two. But in this encounter with God, listen, everything changed for him. Everything. He was going a completely different direction in life. And then he learned something about God. Actually, he learned two somethings about God. And it transformed him into a completely different person. So, I want to tell you guys about that encounter. And I want to tell you these two things that he learned that completely transformed him. And my prayer is this. My prayer is that when you hear this, maybe you haven't thought about it in these terms before. Maybe you haven't really realized it. And it will transform you too. Everybody good with that? All right, so if you have your Bible, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 2 in just a second. And that leader that we're talking about is a guy named Moses. Now, before we get there, let me kind of set the stage up a little bit with what's happening in his life at this moment. So, Moses, he kind of started out his life in a really good way. He got to go on a boat ride down a river in a basket as a newborn. And then he ends up in Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh's kind of like the king of Egypt. So he ends up in this great palace, and he grows up there until his late teens, early 20-ish years. And then all of a sudden he has this really bad day because he begins to realize that this nation of people that is a slave nation that is living in Egypt is a group called the Israelites. It's the Hebrew people. And they are a slave nation. They serve the Egyptian people. But he begins to realize, hey, I am one of those. And I believe that I'm supposed to free them. I believe that I'm supposed to be the one that comes alongside them and sets them and leads them out of this place. And so he begins to start this process. And then he fails epically. Like they reject him. The people of Israel completely reject him. And then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, he gets mad at him for doing this. And then he ends up killing somebody. And like he's on his way out. That's like a really bad day at work, right? First of all, everybody everybody hates you, then you get fired, then you kill somebody on the way to the parking lot. Really bad day at work. That's exactly what happens to Moses one day. And so he sets off, and he becomes a lowly shepherd. And he is defeated. That means he takes care of sheep, by the way. Defeated, discouraged, probably thinks that his life for the rest of his years are going to be spent letting sheep out of a pen and letting them graze around in grass, eat a little bit of it, and then putting them back up, and then repeat for the next 70 years. And that's where he thinks he is. He's defeated. Maybe you have ever been to a place in your life, maybe even you are there right now, where you feel defeated, you feel discouraged, or you feel like you're not quite good enough to be able to make it. Anybody ever felt like that before in their life? Of course you have. Maybe you're even there a little bit right now. But maybe for example, you're about to start a new job or something, and you're just not quite sure that you're up to the challenge. You thought you could, but now you're not so sure. And it seems like everybody else is not so sure that you're up to the challenge too, right? Or maybe you're embarking on some kind of new life journey, like you're going into college, or you're starting a new job, or you're starting something brand new, parenthood for the first time, you're getting married, something's going on, and you're just not quite sure you can live up to it. I remember when I was in high school, you know how they start telling you, like in your junior year and senior year of high school, they start telling you that you're going to be on your own soon, it's going to be the real world, you're going to go to college, and you begin to really question whether or not you're going to make it. Yeah, I remember that distinctly, and maybe you're there. Maybe you are maybe you're just overwhelmed with life, aka parenthood, right? And you just every day is tough. I was hoping that joke would go over way better. Every day is just really, really hard. See how the kids just cooperating with me on this one. Every day is just hard. It's a struggle. And you're worried about how you're going to make it. And you've been to that extremely discouraged place. Of course you have. You've been overwhelmed. And you can just kind of fill in the blank. It's kind of like, you know what? I don't think I am blank enough. Right? Good enough. Good looking enough. Athletic enough. Spiritual enough. Strong enough. And you've been into that place. Well, that's exactly where Moses found himself. And then, one day, everything began to change for him. So if you have your Bible, let's check this out in Exodus chapter 3. And Moses is going to have this experience with God that literally changes everything. You guys ready for it? I don't think you're ready for it. But we're going to go for it anyway. It goes like this. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led his flock to the other side of the wilderness and came back to Horeb, the mountain of God. So quick time out here. Do you get this? That Moses is leading the flock of his father-in-law. He doesn't even have his own flock of sheep. As a matter of fact, he's living there. Now listen, if you are living in your father-in-law's basement tending his sheep at 60, I think that's technically a failure in any culture. So that's where Moses finds himself. There, that's you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. I might have done something a little different. Why the bush does not burn up? And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to take a look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And at this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now, here's why this is interesting, because Moses had been living in Egypt, and they had all these different gods. And matter of fact, the entire nation of Israel had been living there for over 300 years, and they had bought into this. And so they had heard stories about this God, about this solo God, about this God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac. They had heard stories. But this is his first time ever meeting him. This is his first time ever hearing about him. And he said this, the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. We need to change that to a land flowing with pizza and ice cream. The home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. You need to remember those names. Very, very important people. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the Egyptians, the way that they are oppressing them. And so Moses at this moment is like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for you to come down and do something about this. It's about time. And then God said, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I? Wait a second, time out. Just a second ago you said you were going to do it. And now you're telling me that I have to go do it? That's not right. I was all good. And Moses instantly went from here I am to who am I? I mean, real quick. He said, who am I that I'm going to be able to do this? And then God said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, hey, I will be with you. Notice what God promises Moses in this moment. It's his presence. It is not, hey, Moses, listen, I think you're underestimating yourself a little bit here. You should chin up. I think you've got this. Moses, you are much, as a matter of fact, I want you to do a couple things, Moses. I want you to take this mirror, and I want you to look at it and repeat after me. Say this, I am Moses, and I'm a bad man. No, he didn't do that. He didn't do that. And he didn't look at Moses and say, all right, I want you to close your eyes and visualize you walking into Pharaoh's palace. And I want you to visualize you telling him what you're going to do and then beating him up in a fight and walking out. He didn't say that. What he said was, don't worry, Moses, because I'm going to be with you. And I want you to hear this. This is so important. Moses did not look, or God did not look at Moses and say, hey, your competency is what's going to make this happen. What he said was this. Matter of fact, your competency sometimes gets in the way, or your lack of competency. He said, listen, I want you to understand that your confidence does not come from yourself. Your confidence comes from not your competence, but from my character. And what Moses is about to learn about God gives him something that he never had before, and it changes everything. And so then Moses said this. He said, and this is we've assigned you that it is I who have sent you, and you have brought the people out of Egypt. You will worship God on this mountain. And then Moses begins to think. He's like, okay, God, I'm not committed to this yet, but suppose I do go. Just in theory. Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, well, what's his name? Because remember, they don't know this God anymore. What shall I tell them? And God said to Moses, one of the more confusing things of the Bible, right? I am who I am. This is what you were saying to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Now, we don't get this with this word I am. We don't quite understand it because we don't have the Hebrew equivalent of this. But I want you to understand this is a two-part word. It's like they combined a verb and a noun together. And the noun is God's name, Yahweh. And then they put this verb. Do you guys want to learn a little Hebrew word here this morning?
Yes.
All right. You're going to love this one. It goes like this. Hayah. I'm not making that up. If the internet is to be believed, it is Hayah. Let's try this. On the count of three, you guys need to perk up a little bit here. On the count of three, I want you to say it with me. 1, 2, 3. That was somewhat good, but listen, we need a bigger one. If you're not getting a little bit on your neighbor here, you're not saying it right. Let's try it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Now, literally, that word hayah, that combination, the verb is God's name. Now, it comes to this verb that means, we don't have this English equivalent. It means that it means was, is, and will be. The root of this word, was, is, and will be. And so essentially what he told Moses is, I want you to understand that tell them that God who is, was, and will be is coming to you. And Moses learned two somethings about God in this moment that changed everything for him from this moment forward. And they finish out the conversation like this. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. It's never going to change. Now, I want you to understand something. Moses learned two things about God that changed everything. The first one was this. He learned that God never changes. God never changes. And you may think to yourself, well, that's not that big a deal, right? No. I want you to understand this is a huge deal, and it was on this foundation that Moses changed his whole life forever. The second thing he learned is this, is that God is eternal. Meaning as far as you can look this way, God was there. You ready for your head to hurt a little bit? He was just there. Everything, always. And as far as you can look this way, he's going to be there. No beginning, no end. He is eternal. Now, there are so many ways we could have taken this today. We could have talked about this idea that God is, he'd use some big words, that he's omnipotent, which means all-powerful. He's omniscient, which means that he's all-knowing. That he's omnipresent, which means that he's everywhere all the time. We could have talked about the fact that he's 3 in 1 Trinity, but I didn't want to try to explain that to you, so we just sang about it earlier. We could have gone so many directions, but I want you to understand this. God never changes, and he is eternal. And it was on these facts, it was on this character of God that Moses changed his entire life. Everything turned around. It was bye-bye sheep, no more shepherding, no more living in my father-in-law's basement. We're done with this. I am on a collision course with what God has for me. And it changed everything. So let's talk about these things real quick. God never changes. So years later, James, the half-brother of Jesus, would come around and he would say this. He said, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like the shadows. So God never changes. Let me tell you why this is important. First, let me give you, you want one more big theological word? You ready for it? Can you cram one more in? All right, say this with me. Ready? Immutability. Immutability. That's just a big fancy word that means God never changes. God never changes. Now, let me tell you why this is so important. This should be one of the most encouraging things that you ever hear, but it could also be one of the most challenging things you ever hear. Let me tell you why. God never changes. Now, there are things changing around us all the time, right? Like, how many of you have lived here for the last year? Things have changed. Things have changed. I've lived here for a little over 5 years now. Buildings have changed. People have changed. All kinds of things. Roads have changed. Everything has changed. How many of you have any sort of technology, phone, computer? How many of you had that same thing 30 years ago? No. Why? Because technology is constantly changing, right? It's all changing. Our physical bodies are constantly changing, right? You look at yourself the way that you are right now. It wasn't the same as you were 20 years ago, right? Some of you are like, oh. Yeah, it's not, because we are constantly changing. But I want you to understand that even though the world around us changes, even we change, God never changes. And this is why this is important. First of all, I want you to understand this. You ever have like a really moody boss? Anybody ever have that person? I want to ask you if you were the moody boss. I don't want to raise your hand on that. But yeah, or how about this? Have you ever had to live with somebody that's really moody? Whenever I say this, the spouses can. I don't want you to look at your spouse, but yeah, we are surrounded by people that are really moody. It's kind of like this. I've had a couple of really moody bosses in my life, and it's like you walk in one day, and it's like you can be a certain way, and you can talk a certain way. Then you walk in the next day, and you can't, right? Because that person's mood has drastically changed, and it's different from day to day. Could you imagine if God was that way? If he was like, you know what? I just don't like the sound of your voice today. Stop praying. Or, you know what? That song is just getting old. I'm done. Right? Maybe he says that. I don't know. But what if God was like, what if he was moody and he just changed course about things? But guess what? What Moses found out is that God never changes. This is what we call the immutability of God. Right? Actually, that's not a real thing. Don't go quoting that. But God doesn't change his mood at all. I got one left. That's great. God doesn't change his mood. He stays constant forever. And you know what else? God doesn't change his standards or his expectations. Well, what if God said, you know what? I'm going to give you the 10 Commandments, and I want you to get them down. Don't murder people, don't steal, honor your mother and father, all that stuff, that's great. And then you finally get it down. He's like, you know what? Never mind, that stuff's not important. Let me give you some new rules. Now that you got those down, let me give you something else. Like number 1, don't put up your Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving. I already broke that one, I guess. Number 2, don't like the New York Yankees. Got that one down. Number 3, don't drive fast in the snow. Don't eat the yellow snow. What if he just put all these rules together? He was like, I'm just changing everything. It would be like us constantly shooting at a moving target. Never able to hit it, never able to figure it out. But I want you to understand something. That's never going to happen because God never changes. His expectations stay the same. His standards stay the same. He's not going to change that. You don't have to be aiming at a moving target. He is like a rock that does not move, that does not change, that stays there. He is a constant source of strength and hope and love and peace and joy and so many other things that you can try to build your life on. They will let you down if you try to build your life on money, relationships, your success, your education, your strength, even your own physical self. It will always let you down because it is constantly changing. But God never changes. And here, listen, this is the best news you're going to hear all day. You guys ready for it?
Yeah.
His love for you is never going to change. The way that he feels about you and thinks about you, the love that he has for you is never going to change no matter how good you are. You're never going to improve it. And no matter how disobedient you are, it's never going to change it. His love for you is going to stay the same. And so listen, it's not like he's going to look down at us one day and this is the best part of it all. The sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross for you, he's never going to take it back. It's never going to be ineffective. If you believe it's never going to go away, it's not like he's going to look at us one day and be like, you know what? They're just going crazy down there. I take it back. They've lost their minds. They're making frappuccinos out of unicorns. You know, they're spending $5 on coffee. They take the ugliest fruit imaginable, the biggest thing, and they put it in everything, and they drink it, and they eat it. What's wrong with these people? If I see one more pumpkin spice latte, oh, there it is, I'm done. Jesus, it was ineffective. He's never going to do that. You know why? Because he doesn't change. And this should be an incredible source of hope. And when Moses learned this, when he found this out, it changed everything in his life. Everything went on a different direction because he found out that God never changes. Now listen, this should be encouraging, but this should also be challenging because the standards, the expectations, guess what? They also stay the same. And you can trust that they're never going to change. The second thing that Moses found out that's so important is that God is eternal. Now Moses had a very unique perspective on time. Very different than the rest of us. Moses lived to be about 120 years old. That's pretty up there. And he basically had 4 different parts to his life. I already told you about how he was in Pharaoh's house for the first 20 years or so. Then he spent 40 years as a shepherd. And then he spent a little bit of time getting the people out of Egypt into the area going towards the promised land. And then he would spend the next 40 years of his life wandering around in circles listening to people complain. That was his life. But during this time, he got this incredible perspective on time because he learned that God is eternal, meaning he has no beginning and he has no end. And it goes something like this. He wrote it down in Psalm 90, verses 1 through 12. He said this, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you were brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In other words, if you're looking at a timeline, God is forever this way, forever this way. But then he starts bringing it back to us. He says this, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. That's like his Gandalf moment of the Bible right there. If you don't know who Gandalf is, Google it. Not right now, though. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like new grass of the morning. When the morning springs up, it's new, but by evening it is dry and withered. That's like you. That's great news, right? He's being really encouraging. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Our days may come to 70 or 80 years if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow. They quickly pass and we fly away. Do you hear how he's building up to something so encouraging here? If only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath as great as the fear that is your due. Then he says this in verse 12. This is incredible. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What in the world does that mean? Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What he's saying is this. After I've learned about who God is, the fact that he's everlasting to everlasting, what I came away with thinking about me in light of that was that I have to live as though my days are numbered. Because guess what? My days are numbered. And so I have to live as if I have a finite amount of days on this earth, and I need to fill them with the things. And so listen, it's so important. You've done this in other areas of your life. Like if you're in the room and you were married or you're going to get married, you counted down the days to your wedding. At least the wives did. Husbands may not have. You counted down the days. If you, maybe even you're already doing this, you count down the days till Christmas. Because some of you are so excited about Christmas, others of you just want to know how long you've got left. So it's over. If you were a student, or if you are a student, you count down, hopefully you do this, you count down the amount of time you have left till a project's due or a test is coming so that you know how much time you have to prepare. If you don't do this, you may end up as a 60-year-old shepherd living in your father-in-law's basement. So make sure that you get on this, okay? Listen, Moses said, in order for me to gain a heart of wisdom, I need to live as though my days are numbered. Meaning that I need to put the things in my days that are important, not the things that aren't. And from this moment forward, his whole life changed. Because he found out that God never changes and that God is eternal. Everything about Moses was turned upside down. And he went on to become one of the greatest leaders in the entire world because he built his foundation not on his competency, but on the fact that God and his character never change forever. Now, it wasn't just the revelation that Moses had about this that changed him. It was actually his response to the revelation that changed him. So let me ask you a question. Now that you've heard this, and hopefully you've learned it, hopefully it hits you over the last 30 minutes or so as hard as it hit Moses. And hopefully you begin to think about this God that never changes. His love for you never changes. His expectations of you never change. Hopefully you've thought about this God who is eternal. Now I want to ask you a question. What's going to be your response to this God? Will you build your life and the foundation of your life on a God who never changes, who is eternal? And from this moment forward, live as though your days are numbered. Meaning that I'm only going to fill my days with the things that matter and not the things that don't. And I'm gonna listen to what God has for me in my life, and I'm going to go after it with everything I have. Not because I'm competent enough to do it, but because I trust in his character. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you again for the opportunity today to be able to read your word, study your word, and grow from your word. I pray for every single one of us in the room today. God, I pray that we would have a heart of wisdom. And that we would build our life on the fact that you never change forever and ever, from beginning to end. And God, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Help us build our foundation on you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Take that connection card that is in your seat. Take a few seconds to fill that thing out while our ushers are coming forward. And listen, I want to tell you guys about three things. Three things. I know I'm only supposed to tell you one or two, but last week it was two. This week we got to go three. Because listen, this is really important. We have reached the Awaken generosity portion of our year. The holiday season is upon us. Thanksgiving is this Thursday. If you didn't know, now you know. That's crazy that we're already there. Hope that you have a great Thanksgiving. But number one, we have participated in the Operation Christmas Child boxes. They are due today. The great news is you're here for first services. So if you have missed this, you have time. Literally like an hour, but you have time. So you can go right now, get your box, get the list, go to the store, bring it back before the morning is out, and you can make it. If not, we'll try it next year. Second thing I want to let you guys know about is we are participating in joining alongside the city of Schenectady for the Schenectady City Hall a Day event where we give out free hot chocolate, free cookies to everybody that passed by. It's going to be a fun day. And listen, I want you to participate in it. You can be there. You can be there for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or the entire 4-hour period on December the 8th from noon to 4. You can sign up, or if you can't be there at all for whatever reason, but you still want to participate, you can sign up to bring cookies. We need all of that stuff because we give out like millions of them, I think. Now listen, I think it's going to be 72 degrees and sunny that day, so it's going to be a perfect day to stand outside. Okay? Slight chance it's a little lower than that. We'll try to keep you posted on the weather, but this would be a great opportunity for you to just love and serve our community. The third thing I want to let you guys know about is this. Every year we join with the Department of Social Services and a few other organizations as well, and we get families who are in need at Christmas time. They gave me a list of things to talk about with this so I don't forget anything. They don't trust me from the stage anymore. Makes sense. So if you want to participate in this and you want to be able, what we do is we buy gifts. We as a church, we buy gifts for these families, for these kids and adults in need, and we bring them and we're able to deliver them to them and really provide Christmas for people who would not get Christmas this year. And so if you want to participate, here's what you do. You ready?
Yes.
Number one, you select the tag from the Christmas tree that is located directly behind you in the lobby. You take that tag, you sign your name on the piece of paper that's next to the tree, also in the back lobby, with that number. Then, you return your gift to the church no later than December the 16th. You got plenty of time, but don't think that it's plenty of time, because that's how we procrastinate. By December the 16th, you bring it back, unwrapped. How do you bring it back?
Unwrapped.
Unwrapped. With the tag number attached to the gift, with tape, most likely, not super glue. And number three, you check the box by your name to indicate that the gift is returned. That's it. So you've got between now, listen. Every year I think that it's going to take a long time for us to get rid of the items off that tree, but they always go fast. So if you want to participate in this, today is your day. Stop by on your way out and grab the tag off the tree so that we can awaken generosity this Christmas season. All right, one more thing while we're receiving the offering. I want you guys to check out this video with a brand new series that we're going to be starting 2 weeks from today. Check this out while we're receiving the offering this morning. How many of you thought the video was just messing up there at the beginning? A few of you. Yeah, so here's the thing. This Christmas season every year is always packed with distraction. It's always packed with distraction. We want to make sure that we don't necessarily eliminate all the distractions, but that we bring the distractions back into focus about why we're really here, why we really celebrate Christmas. So starting in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about that every single week in December. All right, you guys have a great Sunday. We'll see you back next week at 9 or 10:30. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.